So the college football playoff's going to change very soon. We all know that. When is the college football playoff not changing, right? When's the sport not changing? But Ross Dellinger, among several others, put out a little headline a couple of days ago that had several people up in arms, and I didn't get the outrage only because I thought we already knew this was happening. However, there were some additions here. So Ross basically said, hey, there is growing Big Ten and SEC support for a 16-team playoff, most notably a playoff whose format includes automatic qualifier spots. Now, if you're listening to this show, this is like 2 years old. I've told you that this is coming. In fact, I told you 5 years ago this was coming, and everyone didn't want to believe me. But that's okay. It's not an I told you so segment. But Ross is saying he's basically getting you ready for news over the next couple of months. This isn't going to take forever. This will be decided in the next couple of months, that they're going to announce for 2026 and beyond a new format. It may be 14 teams. It looks more and more likely that it'll be 16 teams, which would mean 4 guaranteed spots for the SEC, 4 guaranteed spots for the Big Ten. That would be 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, 1 for the G5, 3 at-larges. Or if Notre Dame makes it, Notre Dame and 2 at-larges. So the first thing is anytime there's a headline about the playoff, my inbox fills up with, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Or can you believe this? This is an outrage. Am I reading this wrong? No, you're not reading it wrong. Yes, they just expanded it to 12 and they're already working on expanding it to 14 or 16. Why does that surprise you? This was one of the easier things in the world to see coming. And the way I know that is because I can run back footage. I could have Colin right now hit the rewind button. We could go back to 2020 or 21 or 22 when the rumors were first making their way around about expanding from 4. And I told you then, we're not going to 6 or 8. They're going to go well past that. They're going to go to 12. And once they get to 12, spoiler alert, it won't stay there for long. How many times did we do that segment? Those of you who have watched for a long time know I did that segment back then. Did I have some inside source? Did I have Greg Sankey or Ross Pate, or at that time, who in the world would it have been? Kevin Warren. Whew. Friend of the program, Kevin Warren. I didn't have any source. I didn't need it. It was pretty easy to see. Still pretty easy to see. So it was the easier thing, I think, than any of the rest of this to see coming if you know who you're talking about. See, here was my big discrepancy with a large portion of you guys who wanted playoff expansion, and you knew I didn't want playoff expansion, and we would always butt heads. But remember, I used to tell you all the time, if you could guarantee me that the motivation of the people in charge of expanding the playoff was the same as yours, I'd kind of be okay with expanding the playoff. It's not my personal preference, but if I really knew that the people who were in charge of the playoff felt like you, and they really just wanted to enhance the product while respecting the competitive integrity of the game, the stuff that you and I care about, I'd be okay with it. That was never the case. So my stance was always rooted in knowing who was going to make the decision. And the people making the decision never cared about the competitive integrity of anything. I know this is going to come as a shock, but they just cared about money. It's so commonsensical, I often don't state that. But I think I may need to state that. Like, it's going to be hot in the South in the summer, and the motivation for these people is really money. Some of the most obvious things we have to sometimes reaffirm to ourselves. So the big ruse that I think got a lot of people is they convinced enough of the public, hey, quick time out. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. That expanding the playoff was in the best interest of, the overall college football experience, that public sentiment was overwhelmingly in favor of college football playoff expansion. And you just assumed, everyone wants the same thing who wants expansion. No, a lot of people wanted expansion, but some for very different reasons. You wanted it for your reasons. They wanted it because it was an ATM to them. It still is an ATM. It just has a college football playoff logo on the side of the machine, but make no mistake, it is an ATM. And if that ATM didn't exist, if the ability to rapidly increase profit off of re-engineering the sport didn't exist, a lot of people in charge of the sport wouldn't even be in the sport. They're not here because they love it. A lot of them aren't here because they love college athletics. I would go as far as to say some of you who are dipping your toe into this show, but you really love watching political commentary, it's no different than that. You got a few public servants who have their heart in the right place, and you got a lot of people who got themselves elected because they understand it's a cash cow. Doesn't really matter that your salary is $210,000 a year. You're going to get rich because you got elected. Well, likewise, you're going to make a ton of money if you're a stakeholder in college football, as you look out for the kids, of course. So here's what we have to do. We can't just sit there and have that every day. I hate where this is, but I can't sit there and dwell on it every day. That wouldn't be fun. It'd be a little depressing. So here's what I do. I still acknowledge it's the best sport in the world. Even with its flaws, still the best sport in the world. I believe that. I'm not lying to you. I wouldn't talk about it for a living if I felt any other way. I'd go cover whichever other sport I feel is the best in the world. But I'm college football 24/7, 365 because I love it. Grew up loving it. I'll always love it. You have to accept that we're here right now. And so here was my next point of debate that I've had all weekend. We just spent 5 minutes to bring it to this point. The next point of contention many of you have is, all right, if we're going to expand to 14 or 16, that's one thing. But how are the teams going to get decided? And there are two schools of thought out there. The way I figure it, best I can tell, most of you prefer that however big the playoff field is, 14 or 16 or whatever, you just think that the 16 best teams should be taken or the 14 best teams should be taken, and that should be your playoff field. Why should we ever have auto bids? Why should we ever have an automatic qualifier structure? Why should any conference know before the season starts how many teams they're going to get in? And up until about 6 months ago, I felt the same way as you. Throughout the entire history of all of this nonsense, it's expand to 6 or 10 or whatever. I've always thought, well, no matter how big you expand the playoff, shouldn't you try not to overthink the room? Shouldn't you just take however many teams is in the playoff, 1 through that number, 10, 1 through 10, 12, 1 through 12, 16, 1 through 16? Because I always thought automatic qualifiers were dumb. But that was back when we were talking about going from 4 to a bigger number, but still much smaller than 16. But because we have gotten to where we are now, 14 teams versus 16 teams, if that's the debate, I've inverted my thinking on all this. I'm not on the fence on it. I mean, I'm wholeheartedly for the AQ structure over just straight seeding structure. And the reason is the same reason that I've always argued anything I've argued about the playoff. Regular season mattering the most. Now, you don't have to be in the room with me right now. I know what your pushback is. Josh, that's insane. How could the regular season matter any more than if you just know you're going to take the top 16 teams? If you already know how many teams are going to get in from a certain conference, doesn't that render the regular season meaningless? Good question. No, it does not. It actually does the opposite. The devil is in the details. I once thought this, if I'm describing you right now, I thought the same thing. So I know the stance you have. I know all the reasons why you feel the way you feel. But here's what I want you to think about for a second. Now, if you don't share my values about this sport, then that's a different conversation. But I'm just going to ask you a question right quick. Before I give you my reasons why I feel the way I feel, which I know will surprise some of you, I want to ask you, just stop, pause for a second. What do you love about college football? Because I'm going to tell you what I love. It's the regular season. By 10 miles, I love the regular season. It's the only sport, I will grant you that, where I love the regular season more than I love the postseason. Every other sport, including college sports, I love the postseason more than the regular season. College football is one of one. There's nothing else out there, pro or college, where I love the regular season more than the postseason. But for several reasons, I love college football's regular season. I especially love conference races. Okay, so if we have this kind of structure where we go 16 teams, but the SEC knows they're getting 4 in, or the Big Ten knows they're getting 4, or the ACC and Big 12 know they're getting 2 apiece, You got to understand what that's part of. That's not the end of the format. They're making it that way for a reason. Those numbers are what they are for a reason. So take the Big Ten, for example. What's happening here is the Big Ten is looking at their conference races as recently as last year. They watched Oregon, go all the way through the season, number 1 seed, and then they play in Indianapolis. And a lot of people were asking, is it really in Oregon's best interest to even win this thing? You remember in the SEC last year, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, up until they stumbled against Florida, they were in the race. Like they were in the race to go to Atlanta. Lane Kiffin said what a lot of other people were thinking. And he said, does it even benefit us to go to Atlanta to go to the conference championship game? That's horrible for the sport. It just sucks. It's terrible for the sport. I'm not even blaming Kiffin. I would have felt the same way. So what do you do if you run the SEC or you run the Big Ten? Or for that matter, if I was the commissioner of college football, I would look and I would say, you better get your postseason system fixed. Because you're not about to sacrifice the integrity of these conference races, which I care about more than anything, simply because your playoff format's out of whack. So get your playoff format fixed. Well, they all felt that way. So they looked at it and they said, we're going to expand it. Now, that part I hate. But if we're going to accept that they're going to expand it, and we can't do anything about it, once you know it's getting expanded, how do you emphasize and crystallize the conference races being the focus instead of just the rankings and who's in and who's out and who's on the bubble? Well, the way you do it is to guarantee a certain amount of seats at the playoff table. The SEC knows they've got 4. The Big Ten knows they've got 4, just as examples. And then you hit go on the season. And the entire season's about the conference championship race. Instead of, well, Alabama just fell to LSU, but don't worry, they're still ranked 9th. Now, forget about that. Alabama just fell to LSU, so they've got the 4th best record in the SEC, so they've still got a shot at one of the top 2 seeds and therefore a bye into the playoff or one of the 2 play-in games, but it's about the conference race. It's going to be really convoluted. I would argue it's going to be really, really tough to explain this thing to anyone, which, again, was an inevitable byproduct of this. It used to just be, in the BCS days, take the top 2 at the end of the season, they play for a championship. That's it. We're going to take the remainder of our time and donate it to someone else. The speaker from Minnesota, I yield the balance of my time. It used to take half a breath to describe how the college football postseason works. And now it's like, we've been 10, 15 minutes in on this. But here's my thinking. A lot of people will disagree with this. The way they're probably going to structure this, I've got a preference on this, but the way they're probably going to structure this is if the SEC and Big Ten know they have 4 apiece, they stop caring so much about the playoff rankings for a second, and they just care about their conference standings. All the way through the finish line, they care about the conference standings. Now, the way I hope they do it is I hope they go to 16 teams because a 16-team format leaves no buys for anyone in the playoff itself. Everybody plays in round 1 and 2 and 3 and whatever. But I do want there to be buys. I just want them to be baked into the conference championship level instead of the playoff. So like my personal preference is 16 if they're going to go to that, because here's the way I hope it works. In the Big Ten or the SEC, I hope the top 2 teams who previously would have gone to play in a conference championship game, I hope their reward is not playing at all on conference championship weekend. Number 1 gets the crown. Congrats, you won the regular season. Number 2, you finish runner-up, but you guys go take our first 2 seats. You don't even have to play on this first Saturday in December. Number 3, you're going to play number 6. Number 4, you're going to play number 5. And the winners of those 2 games will get our final 2 chairs. That means the top 6 teams in each of those conferences are in, theoretically, play-in situations, or either they're in the playoff. But the point is, think about how intense those conference races are and how important the conference races are. I would much rather focus on that than the playoff holistically. I do know that many of you will disagree on that, but I do feel pretty strongly about that. But I do want you to just remember one thing. If you listen to all that and you said, no, forget about that, don't care. I see your point. I disagree with it. I still just want 1 through 16. What's so hard about that? What's wrong with that? Why should the SEC or the Big Ten be guaranteed that many spots? You can feel that way. I got no problem with it. But I want you to remember there's been another caveat to all of this conversation. It's not getting the headlines, but you need to pay attention to this language in any of these reports. Could be Thamel or Dellinger or Zenitz or whoever. When they put out these reports, every one of them mentions something about strength of schedule. Every one of them mentions something about changing the definition and how we define the strength of schedule metric. Let me translate that for you. The Big Ten and the SEC are tired of their 9-3 teams being compared to other 9-3 teams or even 10-2 teams, because the SEC and the Big Ten are looking at it and saying, do you understand how radically more difficult it is to play in our leagues than any other league? And they're not wrong about that. Now, they're the reason it exists that way, because they went and swallowed up most of the bigger brands and created their mega conferences, which I didn't like. I wish we could go back in time. But again, if we hit start right now, they are right about that. And so what they're saying is, since we're in charge, really, 2026 and beyond, the only way we're going to agree to any of this is if you give us our AQ spots, first off, and secondly, you better learn. In fact, you're going to. There's no you better anything. There's not an ultimatum. You're going to change the way we define strength of schedule, because there's got to be room to calibrate for how much more difficult the strength of schedule is in the Big Ten, or especially the SEC, than the Big 12 or the ACC or a G5 conference. That's going to happen. And what I'm telling you that for is because if you recalibrate that and factor that into the equation, and you understand how deep the Big Ten and the SEC are now and moving forward, it may be that the ACC or the Big 12 are blessed to have 2 guaranteed spots at the table. Whether your logic and principles and values agree with it or not, I'm just trying to explain the way that that could work in the future is, instead of having 8 spots at the table guaranteed, you could have a playoff with like 11 or 12 SEC Big Ten teams in there. And honestly, they could look at it even then and say, you know, it's still not enough. We still need to go off and do our own thing, because the gulf between the quality of football we're playing and the quality of football everyone else is playing, blah, blah, blah. You know how that would go. So I had a quote written down. We did a segment on this 4 years ago. We might as well have put on the Karnak hat. I mean, we were so prophetic about it, and we nailed exactly where it was going to go. And I said the following in one of those videos: if we realize I'm right, it'll be too late. Well, here we are. What do we do about it? I don't know.